Alright, so let's step back in on this creature and let's have another session here and see where we end up with it, shall we? Alright, so where we left off, we had just added these bony protrusions around the top, and I really dig those. Really like how that's coming out. I want to start thinking about some kind of a face, some kind of facial features in here. So let's start playing around with some things. I'm thinking, let's give it some ridge right through here, coming out of those bone protrusions. Play around with just some different shapes and pattern type stuff that can come out of that. I like the idea of having lines that come up in the forms that reinforce some of the designiness of a cephalopod or a squid or octopus type creature. So you can play around with some of that stuff. I don't want to have it end up being too familiar looking though. So right there I was starting to veer towards having almost a mammalian sort of nose, and I want to pull back from that so that we keep it kind of strange. I think it does need to have a place for a mouth somewhere, so let's look at maybe a cavity right here. Okay, that would be ringed with teeth. That could be kind of cool. Alright. And let's pull some mesh out from that. Give it these kind of flaps coming down like that. I think we could do some really disgusting looking things with that. Pull those up a bit, and I want to inflate them just so they have a little more thickness, that way they don't go away whenever I dynamesh again. Pardon me, a little bit verklempt right now, as my wife would say. So I think I'm going to drop a placeholder in here for some eyeballs. So hit B and you grab an insert sphere, and let's just pop those in there. And I'm thinking maybe those are a little large. So let's go smaller with them. Okay. And then let's look at having maybe a few more sets of eyes, because anything having more than one set of eyes is always just creepy. Then I'm going to split those into their own subtool. That way they're visible, but I'm not going to be touching them, and I can sculpt around them and keep those there for reference as I'm sculpting. Turn on transparency and make some divots in here so that I have cavities there. Eventually I think I'm going to want to Z-remesh this and maybe even send that over to Maya and build a clean topology out of it, because the further I go with this, the more I really dig it. So I'm going to go ahead and have some indentation for that stuff. And I think I want to bump my resolution up one more time now that we're starting to get some more surface, some more detail. That way I have a little bit more to play with in building up some of these areas. So let's just, this is a neat way to build an eyelid when you're sculpting something like this, is to mask off an area, and then we can just use the transpose tools to control, click, and drag to extrude a bit of it. So now I'm going to pull that out, pull it around that big eyeball there. Let's turn my smoothing level up a bit more. There we go. Okay. So there's an upper eyelid on those. Now let's do kind of the same sort of thing under here. There's a couple other ways that we could do that too, but maybe I'll kind of show some of that here in just a minute. Let's get some extrusions going there. And I'm holding control and clicking anywhere that's masked, and what that'll do is it'll blur my masking. So then I can come back in and smooth some of this stuff out. I can also hit polish, which if you notice I've customized my interface. I use polish a lot, so I've customized the interface so that I have a copy of the polish dial or polish slider up in the top of the screen. Normally you'd find that under deformation. So let's smooth my masking a bit. Now let's pull that eyelid back out. There we go. That seats quite nicely around that eyeball. Very happy with that. So clear my masking, and then I'm just going to come in here and refine this a bit. Now, it's quite possible that if I dynamesh this, some of this detail in here is going to get lost when it calculates the volume and meshes it all together, but let's just try that and see what we get. That's not too bad, actually. It's not too bad of an interpretation of that through the Dynamesh. So this is just concept sculpting at this point anyway, so I'm not really too concerned with having all those details exactly perfect. So looking at where I put these eyeballs, I'm going to want to build up some volume around them so that they can have the appearance of facing forward. So let's just grab an inflate brush and switch back and forth between inflate and clay buildup. So there you can see we're starting to build up that cavity, that eye socket. So another way to do those eyelids would be to actually draw on some topology for that. So we could do some lines with our topology brush, like so. And then just connect those, and you'll see we end up with this separate group, the separate set of mesh sitting on the surface. So then we could pull that forward and move that around, or let's just group that all together. So now the next time that we Dynamesh, that will become its own Dynameshed piece. And then from there we can pull that forward, shape that however we like. Okay. And to push the mesh away, I'm using my move brush, and I'll hold Alt, which will either push or pull it in or out from the screen instead of moving it perpendicular to the screen as it normally does. So let's inflate that just a bit. So now I want that to Dynamesh into the rest of this main form. So I'll hide everything except them and group them together. If we turn on our polyfill or polyframe, you can see that. So now when I Dynamesh this again, it will flow together. So there we have an eyelid created with that method. I kind of like that method just because it's so accurate. You just immediately have this form that hugs right onto whatever you're trying to put it around, whether it's putting skin around an eyeball or whether you're building clothing of some sort. The topology brush is a great way just to have nice geometry build up. So I'm going to repeat that method. It's also nice too because you get a different feel in designing using the topology brush. And I'm a firm believer that the way a tool feels plays a big role in the kind of designs that you'll tend toward making with it. Okay. So again, we want to give this its own group. Then use my move tool to just lift it a bit and then tuck some parts in. Okay. Smooth that back a little. Now I'm going to Dynamesh. And of course it is its own thing still because we didn't regroup it. It's its own group there. So I'll just pull that up. Get that in place right here. Alright. Now let's group these together. And Dynamesh it. And they should join together. And we have a nice little eye socket sort of area there. I'm going to shrink some of this back, just smooth it so that we get more of a bulbous area built up around those eyes. I really want those to kind of bug out a little bit more than that. At this point, it's almost like a cross between some kind of weird spider or octopus. And it's kind of cool. Those are both really creepy things that kind of trigger a lot of creepy ideas in many people. So that's a good ballpark to be playing in, you know. Right. Just kind of playing with some different shapes to add some interest into the sides of this. Let's smooth that back out. I'm thinking I'd like to give it maybe some gills. And in doing this, I'm going to build these along the side, just drawing them on, invert my mask, and then control, click, and drag inward with a transpose move tool. And once that's in there, I'm going to smooth that back out a bit and redynamesh. Okay. Getting some really interesting shapes out of that. I like this theme that's kind of developing of these lines and flaps. I think that gives us it's given me some ideas that I think could be really interesting, especially coming along this shape back here. So let's build that up a little bit. I think I want to play around with this area. The idea of maybe some flap sort of deal coming off of the ridge around the top of those gills. Smooth that back out just a touch. Now let's do some masking. I'm going to use that mask to do some extruding. So here we go. Now I'm going to invert that, and there we go. I want to find a view that'll let me draw my transpose line at basically the angle that I want to extrude these, and then I'm going to extrude them pretty far. So I just smoothed my masking a bit. Okay, this is getting really interesting now. Let's take the move brush. I want to fan this out. I really like just the odd, fishy, deep sea feel that this is starting to have to it. It's really, I went into this without any concept at all of what I was going to do. It was just going to be an experiment, just some time to play around with shapes and see what kind of creature I could come up with. And as I work with it, I'm really getting into it more and more, where this is leading, and that's always a fun thing to have happen. So I'm just going to refine this a little bit with some inflate and some smoothing, that way we get enough volume in it that it doesn't totally disappear the next time we dynamesh. So I think we're ready to do that. So let's dynamesh that. Right. So now we've got this nice volume. I love these lines that showed up in that. That was a happy thing to have happen there, because there's something about those that just feels right to me. It feels like a natural camouflage, something that the creature could hide among shells and rocks, and just flap those things out and blend right in. So there's a believability to what's coming out of this that really makes me very happy. So I think I want to start working on some things to make this a little more menacing, though. And along those lines, I'm thinking about maybe some barbs, some hooks. And the way that I want to go about that is going to be through some extrusions out the front of these. Let's actually just add a number of these along the way. So masked everything except those little dots, and then we extrude those out, and we start to get at least a feel of what I'm thinking. I think I'm going to undo back past that though and do this a slightly different way, where I sculpt out a specific piece, kind of like we did with the that spine that runs through the underside. I'm going to sculpt out a real specific tooth shape and then make that an insert brush. So to do that, let's go back and mask some of this off. If I hit Control W, it's going to make a group out of it. Then hitting Control E a couple times will add edge loops around that. Now I have this really smooth group that I can do extrusions with. And I'm just going to select that little group at the end. Now group these together. And I'm hitting Control-Shift-S and Control-Shift-X to expand and contract what is or isn't selected. Okay, that's a bit much right there. Yeah, I don't want to lose that clean little connection at the bottom. I really dig that part. There we go. So now we have these nice hookable shapes. I'm going to grab a pinch brush and use that to sharpen these up a bit. Okay. Then I want to take an H polish. It's a hard polish. And just come in and tighten them up even more. Okay. Now, if I turn off symmetry and I have just this one visible, then I can make an insert mesh of it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to our first insert mesh that we made that was for this sort of spinal looking joint. And I'm going to add this to that brush instead of making a new one. So we'll hit Create Insert Mesh, and instead of hitting New, we're going to hit Append. And skip the note until the next time around. Next time we restart. So now, if I hold M, you'll see that I can now choose between two different inserts in my brush. And I can draw now this guy on the surface. If I change my brush size when I'm editing my curve, then it'll change the size of that mesh as it shows on the surface. So let's just make those a little bit larger. And then let's add a few more to it. All right. So now I'm going to delete my curve that was drawn and just push these guys all up into the surface like so. And there you see we're getting this nice mean serrated sort of appendage built now. Also want to add some angles to this, I think, using an H polish brush. So I think that'll give it an even more severe sort of attitude. Yeah, like that. I think that makes for a more interesting looking shape right there. Then I think I also want to add some little ridges to it, just to add a little more complexity to that shape. So you see I drew those lines across with masking. Now I'm going to go under. I'm going to follow this line that you can see the highlight of created from when I was using that H polish. Now I'm going to make those their own group, and then go to edge loop, crisp. I'll set this to 0.1 displacement. All right. Now we can relax that back just a little bit. You see we have our ridges created. Yeah, I kind of like those. Those are pretty cool. All right. Now then, I want to make sure that these are grouped together so that whenever we Dynamesh again, it'll fill these holes, and then those teeth will become their own groups. Now, I'm going to take my clay polish, or excuse me, my clay buildup, and add a couple more of these guys in. And now let's Dynamesh this and see what we get. Alright. Oh, almost forgot. Almost forgot. I want to group all of this stuff in with the big eye here. There we go. So now let's see what we get. There, that's much better. So now that's all contiguous mesh. Now, this big flat area here, I feel like something needs to happen with it, but I'm not quite sure what. So I'm going to doodle in that spot for a little bit. Just kind of see where we end up. You know, made-up creatures like this are fun because you can just fly wherever and, you know, see where it lands. Alright. Really kind of digging that. Let's finish up around these eyes up here. I almost forgot about those. Take the move brush, reach in here, let's pull these guys out a little bit, pull this out a little bit. Let's maybe make these pinch up a little bit more. Like so. Alright. Yeah, we'll Dynamesh it. And it royally freaked out on me there. I don't know why. So let's try that again. That's more like it. Alright. Now then, just go in and give it a little bit more A little bit of love in the center of this area here. I like that sort of fleshy looking crown starting to come out of that. That's kind of neat. I think I want to build on that design element with some little raised spots. Don't even know what they'd be. Don't really care either. It's really just about design at this point. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty neat. Definitely not something I would want to run into while swimming. Let's go through and heighten these up a little bit, kind of make this stuff a little more pronounced again. I think I want to come through here and tone some of that back down. Okay. Here I'm using an H-polish brush. I like the way that works sometimes for pushing back into different areas and kind of blending things back into a smoother, flatter surface in some spots. I think we've definitely got a Cthulhuoid sort of feel, definitely a Lovecraftian sort of feel going on here. And that's a good thing. That's home for me. Spent a lot of time through the years doing Lovecraftian stuff, so it's just I want to build this fleshiness up here, but I don't want to lose the that skeletal structure. I think that was really a nice little showpiece underneath this guy. There we go. Okay. Looking pretty dang cool. So now I'm going to grab my insert mesh again and not do that. Here we go. Okay, and I'm going to make my brush a little larger. Sometimes you'll draw on a curve with a smaller brush, but your insert meshes will end up being so small that it's not really what you want. But the smaller brush size will cause your curve to flow easier on the surface. So a lot of times I will draw at a small size like that, but then come back after the fact with a larger brush and just touch that curve, so then it makes my my insert meshes get larger again. Alright, I think that works well for our barbed guys. Now, let's look at maybe... let's make sure that we embed these. Sometimes you're probably going to have to do a little build up to make sure they're embedded, which isn't a bad thing. It helps it feel like there's some flesh around them anyway. So. Alright. So there are all our frontal pieces. Have their nice little barbs. I dig those. And I want to group those all together just for organization's sake. And then I want to make sure that all of this is grouped together so that when I dynamesh again, it's not going to have anything weird left over. Okay. Cool. Nice, nice. So now, smooth this stuff out a bit. I think I want to take an alpha to some of this. I'm not sure. I'm going to grab my standard brush. Let's see. Let's look on the default alphas, and we'll just grab this guy. And I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. And then let's look at our brush. Turn the lazy step up a little bit so we get some separation. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for right there. Nice, nice. It's a great way to get some quick ridges, build up something nice and interesting there. Let's do something similar. Let's do the same thing actually, but do it with the inflate brush so that it moves out from the surface by normals. Let's crank that up a little bit. Yeah, see, now it's going to go out in all directions, which is kind of cool. It's not exactly what I'm looking for here. I'm going to mask the bottom of that off. That way I don't end up accidentally having things inflate that I don't want to inflate. Let's try that again, but with a little higher intensity and a little smaller brush. I think the brush needs to be larger. Here we go. And sometimes, you know, it's just trial and error, finding the right settings to get what you're thinking of. Getting closer now. There we go. Much more along the lines of what I was after. You can always smooth it back out too and do some more with it. So I want to add a little bit more like that. Really digging the way that tentacle's coming out. So now let's take it smaller. Let's kind of work our way around this guy. A similar sort of effect. Alright. And let's get this one back here in the very back. Alright, it's looking pretty cool. Pretty cool. So the next thing I want to do is rough up these undersides a bit. And one good way to do that is by taking this clay buildup brush and setting it to spray. You'll see you get almost a barkiness to it. Let's turn the intensity down a touch on that. That's a great way to add like some surface noise into things very quickly. So I'm going to use that to sort of flesh out the rest of this surface. I really like the way that was looking. I think it gives it just the right sort of meatiness, a little bit of chaos involved. Just throw a little bit on these flaps. Alright. And, oh, let's give these guys the same sort of treatment here too. Maybe not quite so much. Okay. And I think I'm ready to call that a finished concept sculpt. Oh, no I'm not. This thing needs teeth inside here. So let's use our insert mesh once again. Let's see if we can't draw that bad boy some teeth. Okay. Just like before, I want to make them bigger, so I'll wait until after I have the curve drawn the way I want it, and then from there I can increase my brush size and I can make them bigger that way. Right, so now take my move brush, I'll just embed these back in the rest of that surface. Cool. Alright, so let's hit the turntable real quick and let it spin, see what we got. Digging it. I really like the just the way the different shapes come together. It has enough elements of familiarity from things in nature to make it seem kind of believable, and yet it's just such a combination of them that it could be really, really scary. So I'm gonna call that a success, and probably the next video I do with this will be the process of doing a clean topology over this, and then transferring some details and getting it ready for UVs and texturing. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. I'm Les. I don't remember if I introduced myself at the beginning of this. My name's Les Garner. I'm the guy behind 6S1 Media, and so we've got a lot of cool stuff going on. And I hope that watching these videos, you can get a little more familiar with us, and maybe come along for the ride. We've got a comic book project coming up called Apocalypse Girl that we're going to be doing a Kickstarter for. We're involved in some game developments. We release a ton of products for Poser and DAZ Studio users, all kinds of stuff like that. And so just if you Google 6S1, you'll find us. And if you dig the video and you dig the kind of stuff that you're seeing here, just come check us out, and maybe you'll find something else you like. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching.